Hey everyone, my name is Paul Vojchehoske and welcome to the Real Estate Classroom YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to discuss environmental issues. Environmental issues you need to know for your real estate exam as well as in your real estate practice. But before we get to that, please do me a favor, give this video a thumbs up, hit that red subscribe button, click on the notification bell. Comments and questions down below. Let's get to today's video. So in today's video, we're going to discuss environmental issues. Issues that you as a student need to know for your real estate licensing exam, as well as what you need to know as a practitioner as well. Now, in my previous video, in my last video, I did a video on environmental laws. We discussed 4 major federal laws or regulations that you have to know for your real estate licensing exam. I'm going to put a link right up here in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's probably a good idea to go watch that video and then come back and watch this video. It'll just make the learning process a little bit easier. Now, again, in today's video, we're going to discuss 5 environmental issues that you have to be aware of. We're not going to discuss any specific state or federal laws regarding these because you really don't need to know them for your exam, but we have to know about these environmental issues because they are very prominent in our business. They are electromagnetic fields, radon, carbon monoxide, mold, and asbestos. So let's look at the first one, electromagnetic fields. Now, electromagnetic fields, or what we like to call EMFs, they really impact how we do real estate, okay? Now, EMFs are generated by power lines. So you may have in your area, large overhead power lines. That creates those electromagnetic fields. Now, one concern living next to or living in a house that's next to a power line is those EMFs, they cause cancer. That is a perception. Now, as of the date of this video, there has actually been no study that has confirmed that EMFs or living near power lines actually causes cancer, all right? Now, there is a fear out there. I'm just telling you as of the date of this video, there's no documented evidence. However, if I'm a buyer, that's going to be very concerning to me. If I'm a listing agent that has a house next to a power line, that is also going to make my job a whole lot harder. So although there's no documented evidence about EMFs, the one thing that is very documented, that is if you're a listing agent, it makes it very, very difficult to sell homes next to power lines. So as you get into your real estate career, at some point, you're going to be faced with that situation. The next one is radon. Now, radon's kind of a big deal for a lot of reasons. It's a big deal in certain parts of the country and not so big deal in other parts of the country. Radon is a radioactive gas that it results from the natural decay of uranium that's found in the soil. And as that uranium decays, it generates that radon gas. That radon gas filters to the surface, and then it ends up in homes, in particular homes that have basements, although slab homes can also have high levels of radon. Radon is colorless, it's odorless, you can't smell it, but it is the second leading cause of lung cancer next to smoking. So it is very relevant in many parts of the country. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency has created a standard that we use for testing and remediation purposes. So any home that's been tested and there is a level of radon that is 0.4 picocuries per liter, and I have it on your screen there, you can see what that looks like, then it's recommended that remediation happens. In some parts of the country, in some states, in some localities, it may be required that remediation happens. There are certain parts of the country that require the testing for radon prior to the transfer of title, and it's a seller responsibility to remediate. That is not the case in every part of the country, and so you have to know your own local jurisdiction and your own requirements in that jurisdiction. But 4 picocuries per liter is the standard for remediation. Now let's talk about testing. Testing, there are several different methods of testing. There's short-term, intermediary, and then long-term. I was a housing officer in the military for a couple of years when I was in the service. And one of the things we were doing is testing for radon. We only used, for government housing, the 365-day test because it gave you the broad spectrum of the all 4 seasons, the different rainy seasons, dry seasons. So it gave you a good baseline over a long term. In fact, military housing at that time would only remediate or cure the problem if they found the level to be 0.4 or above over a 365-day average. Now, we don't have that luxury in real estate sales because typically where we discover radon is during the inspection process in that period between contract to close, when the buyer has their whole home inspection done or there's a due diligence period. That's typically when these tests are done. And typically it's a 3-day test or a 7-day test. And those tests are really good at least identifying if there's potentially a hazard for radon. Typically, though, what happens is if it's above the EPA standard of 0.4, even on those 3 and 7-day tests, typically there is some type of remediation that does go on. Again, in some parts of the country, it's required. In some parts of the country, all new construction has to have the remediation system for radon built in. And quite frankly, some parts of the country, they don't have radon issues. You go to Arizona, they don't have radon issues. You go to like where I'm at in Nebraska or the East Coast, there's big radon issues, and it all has to do with the soil, the type of soil that's in a local area. Trust me, when you get your license, you're going to know more about radon than you probably ever want to know. All right. Testing is really the only way to tell whether or not you have a radon issue. And I would tell you that as a real estate licensee, one of the things you have to be aware of is if radon tests come back above that decimal 4 picocuries per liter, most of the time the seller is going to remediate it. There's absolutely no requirement to do that, and the buyer and seller can say, the buyer can say, "Listen, I'm fine with it. I will take care of it myself." However, one thing you want to make sure as a licensee that you do is document everything. Document and disclose. Document and disclose. Once you have knowledge that radon exists and it's above that decimal 4, there is a disclosure requirement. That is an adverse material fact. Carbon monoxide is another one. Carbon monoxide is deadly. It kills people every year in this country. It is an odorless, colorless gas that's created by the burning of fuel or fuel combustions. Sources of carbon monoxide in a home is our furnace, whether it's natural gas or whether it's heating oil, whether it's propane, fireplaces, gas appliances, hot water heaters, wood stoves. Pretty much anything that can create a flame is going to then create carbon monoxide. The great thing about carbon monoxide is it's easily detected. You can go down to the local hardware store for $25 and get a good carbon monoxide detector. Now, many states across this country and many local jurisdictions, they have put in place ordinances and statutes that require the carbon monoxide detectors be placed in the homes, and they all look a little bit different. So wherever you're practicing real estate or whatever state you're studying in, you better make sure you know what that state-specific law is. Like here in Nebraska, we do have what's called the Carbon Monoxide Detector Act, and it requires that a carbon monoxide detector be placed on each habitable level of the home prior to the transfer of title or prior to the transfer of the legal right of possession in a rental property. So that is going to be on the Nebraska state side of the real estate exam. So you have to know your state requirements because I guarantee it's probably going to be on your state side of your exam. So carbon monoxide, though, that's what you need to know about that. Mold. Man, mold is a big issue in our industry, and there's more lawsuits that are generated because of mold than maybe just about anything else. Now, understand the basics of mold. Mold is a fungus. It's a fungus that needs to repopulate itself or reproduce. So it creates these things called spores, and these spores float in the air and then they attach themselves to wet surfaces like in the bathroom, in the laundry room, the kitchen, things like that. And then the spore starts to grow and it creates mold. Now, there are very dangerous types of mold, and then there's, not so dangerous types of mold. But even the non-dangerous types of mold can be very detrimental to someone's health if they have allergic reaction or they have asthma or a pre-existing medical condition. Now, typically we discover mold in one of two ways. It's visual, so we look at a surface or the drywall, for example, in the bathroom, and it looks like, yeah, that could potentially be mold. Or most of the time, it's through the home inspection process. When we hire that home inspector to come in and look over the home to make sure everything is good, they're looking specifically, in addition to other things, they're looking for the evidence of mold. And if they find evidence of mold, they will then recommend further testing, because the only way to tell whether it's actually mold and what type of mold it is through a test. All right, so testing is what confirms mold. So what should the licensee do? Well, once they discover that there's mold, the licensee should recommend testing, and they should recommend that the mold be removed using industry standards, which most of the time is hiring a certified, licensed, bonded contractor or professional to come out and remove it and treat for mold so it doesn't come back, and those type of things. All of that generates documentation. So as a licensee, document, disclose, even if the buyer and seller are aware there's mold. Maybe a test was done, or maybe a test was not done, and there is evidence of mold from visual inspection. The real estate agent needs to make sure that there is written documentation and written disclosures so everybody knows, particularly the buyer knows, hey, I am under my own free will. I'm buying this property knowing that mold exists or the evidence of mold. There appears to be mold. We want that documentation for legal purposes and everything else. So mold is definitely an issue, and I guarantee you when you get to your first company, you and your broker are going to have a lot of training sessions on how to deal with mold regarding, your local area. Last but not least, number 5 is asbestos. Now, asbestos isn't used anymore, but it was very popular, 50, 60, 70 years ago. It is actually a natural mineral, and it was used in just about every building material you can imagine. We're talking shingles, insulation, flooring, floor tiles. It was used in everything, numerous building materials, because of its fire resistance or its fire retardant properties. All right. So the problem with asbestos is the health risk that it poses, and that's why it's been banned, quite honestly. So when you're in a home, and just about, understand this, many buildings across the United States have asbestos-related materials in the home. The question becomes, what kind of condition is that material in? Again, you may have a roof, for example, that's an asbestos roof, but it's in decent condition. Probably one of the options is just to leave it alone until a point that you need to remove it, because once you start removing it, that's when it becomes dangerous. Or if it's in not good condition and it starts chipping away, or we sand it or we're scraping, it creates a situation where the asbestos material becomes what we call friable. And I have that term on your screen, and you probably need to know that for an exam. So if that asbestos becomes friable and you breathe it in, it gets stuck in your lungs, then it can, down the road later on, cause a serious type of cancer called mesothelioma. And I have that on your screen there on how to spell that, mesothelioma. So it poses a huge health risk. So what do we do? How do we get rid of asbestos? Well, first of all, we may not get rid of it. We may encapsulate it. We may seal it, or it may be in good condition, so we're going to leave it there. But if we have to remove it, understand this. You should only remove asbestos, or you should only use a certified, properly trained contractor to come in and remove asbestos, because not only are they going to have to use certain types of protective equipment, there are also disposal regulations that the EPA have. So the asbestos needs to be disposed of in a certain way. It has to be packaged a certain way. It has to be labeled a certain way. And, you know, that's why we hire professional contractors that have been trained in that field to do it. So what should the licensee know? Number one, document and disclose, like everything we talked about. If you have knowledge that there is asbestos containing materials in that house, it has to be disclosed, period. Again, if you don't have knowledge, it doesn't have to be disclosed. Just because a home is built in 1960 and it has shingles that kind of look like the type that were used that had asbestos doesn't mean that we have actual knowledge. The only way that we know whether or not a material has asbestos is through testing. Some jurisdictions and states require asbestos testing, some do not. So you're going to have to know the laws in your state and localities. But again, the licensee needs to know, document, disclose, document, disclose. Now, don't forget, if you have not watched the other video where I discuss the 4 major environmental laws that you have to know for your exam, I highly suggest doing that. Here's a link to the video right there. And if you have not subscribed, please do me a favor, click the little circle to my left. I would appreciate it. That's all for this video. Thanks for hanging. I'll see you in the next video.